Hey guys, and welcome back to In the Crosshairs. My name is Freddie or Grimmy Rana, and today we have the caster, the content creator, the merch designer, pretty much everything you could list. Launders, firstly, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on. I saw your email with your all your credentials, jack of all trades, a man after my own heart.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that when I was writing that, I was like, and I was kind of thinking, I was like, oh, Launders is definitely someone who like I'm inadvertently copying in a sense, like replicating in a weird way. But if anyone is unknown of what the INSITE channel is, it's the insight onto everything Counter Strike. We have this series, we have In the Crosshairs, which I host. Each week we get someone from Counter Strike. Literally anyone in the scene. We've had coaches, IGLs. We've had last week we had Kezival, the IGL for Astralis female team, and then this time we've got Launders. You're the first talent person I think we've had on the in the series, and we've also got DE underscore constructed, which is hosted by Harry and Sam. They delve into something very in depth about a team. They've done episodes about Navi, about Astralis, and they're trying to do a weekly series over there as well. So make sure if you do want to learn literally anything about Counter Strike, take a look at this channel. But getting straight into it, a really simple question I like to just ask everyone straight away is like, how did you get first into CS?
I Toronto has always had a pretty big land scene, and I think it's sort of like second nature for someone growing up here to think about playing games at internet cafes, which we also have big PC cafe culture. So when I was younger, it would be two posters on every internet cafe with StarCraft and Counter Strike, and we would all go play 1.5 together, and then you stay on Steam, you play 1.6, you play Source, you give up on Source because it sucks, and then you come back for CS:GO. And when I came back for CS:GO, I was like 23 or something like that. So I was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna have like a pro career, but I
Mm.
still really love the game." So I was like, "Okay, maybe I'll try starting a YouTube channel and see if I can have a path as a content creator." That was pretty much the plan.
Okay, so because what I was going to say is that you did dabble in competitive CS, right?
I did, yeah, I did, but I was like, I think there was this sort of fork in the road at one point where I was commentating after doing YouTube, and then I had played on BOXR, a team with my own brand, and we played one season of main. We had a really really strong season. It was one map away from making Premier, but we didn't make
Oh
it, and then they
shit.
won. It was my first season in Eyes and IGL as well, so I was like, "Oh, I really want to try again." But when it didn't work out, I had a casting event that actually lined up with like Overpass week, and then our match in playoffs that we lost, we had Overpass, and it was the one map I didn't get to prepare that season because of casting, and I had to decide, if I'm going to try again and potentially miss out on a week of an entire map that I have to prepare, or if I should just lean into casting. And I decided like it was never really the plan to start playing. I didn't know I would enjoy it that much,
Hmm.
and I think I probably could have had like a decent career as a player, but honestly, I think I would have. I'm not like insanely talented or anything, so I think I would have grinded a lot, probably been in the bottom tier of NA, and that's not a very fun life. And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, casting might be a lot more fun for me,
Yeah,
so
that's
that's how I
actually
got into it.
kind of ironically exactly the same with me, but I wasn't quite the same level. I played like intermediate, and then I was like, this is not worth my time, and then transitioned over towards like with casting and stuff like that. So, question I want to actually ask you: when you competed and stuff like that, do you actually find because of your time in competing, that's actually helped you immensely and potentially put you in an advantage over others who maybe haven't played at like a high level?
I think it both helps a lot, but also kind of breeds some insecurity because I'm constantly aware of how fresh my game knowledge is. And
Yeah.
in this context, it's very not fresh in the sense of like I played my last ESEA season in like 2016, and I realized right after that when I came into commentary, I was so hyper aware of micro decision making as well as the meta on top of all the things that you learn when you're in a team that's like competing at a decently high level, and how quickly that knowledge expires after a year and 2 years, and how hard it is to update that information. So no, I think it's given me it's definitely armed me a lot as a color commentator and is the basis for all of my fundamental understanding of Counter Strike. And I use it all the time when I cast today. But it also has been it also has been something that I think about constantly for the fact that I realize that you know if you're not playing every single day, you're not going into scrims all the time, and you're not learning the smokes that like guys who are grinding through
Mm.
ESEA league seasons all the time are, you're not going to be able to pick up on it just by watching demos. It's very hard. So it takes a lot of talking to people and other players, and still trying to play even just a little bit to
Yeah.
stay on top of things.
Because I think, especially right now, in my perspective, the meta evolves a lot quicker than I think it did in the past. Does that add to maybe the difficulty of it as well?
It does. I think that there's sort of two ways to look at it. I think on the one hand, when I started commentary, I tried to be an analyst as a commentator. And I think over the years, I've sort of tried to draw a balance between having strong color, but also recognizing that a really good broadcast has to do with color, but it also has to do with being a good commentator,
Mm.
agnostic of your actual role. And I think that's so, even though a lot of nuance is missed, and like insecurity is definitely at its highest these days with how many details have changed in the game overall. I also try not to focus on them too much because that's only part of my job. And then there's also the analyst desk after the cast. So I
Yeah.
do live analysis is my favorite thing for sure. But I try to make sure that I always think about doing analysis, but being a good commentator first.
Okay, so you were saying that that's an insecurity potentially that you have gained recently. So back when you were having your first big break, did you actually have a lot more confidence in sometimes what you were saying?
Yeah, ironically, a lot more confidence, but I was so much worse as a broadcaster.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I think I knew, and also it's sort of like if you learn too much and you know too many details, well, then you're going to get like a word salad out every single
Mm.
round. There's not going to be enough room for Scrawny to talk. It's going to be like the me show, and I think that's something that happens if you know too much. Honestly, you're just going to want to be able to tell everybody everything. So it somehow actually helps to like think a little bit or know a little bit less, if that makes sense. I don't. It sort of
I get
sounds
what you mean.
strange, but yeah, it can help for sure. And when it comes to preparing, I find that it's much more valuable to the broadcast to prepare storylines than it is to prepare detailed analysis on individual players. So I try to watch a lot of individuals that I want to learn more about the way they play a role, but then not focus too much on the specific map in which they did a specific move or they landed a certain way, and leave that to like Mohan on YouTube or Maui on the desk.
Mm. I think that's actually, yeah, that's definitely something it's very interesting you pointed on that because that's definitely something that I notice a lot when I was maybe like starting out casting. I was ingraining myself with all these statistics and all these positions that these players played and all the rotations, and I was like, people actually don't care about that. What people care about is like, oh, this team, if they do that, if they win this match, it means this, and if this player does this, it means this, and like add some more excitement to the cast. And so just looking back at when you first started out, I just want to kind of go through maybe like a chronological order in a second of when you had your first big break. Sorry, what was your first big break in CS that, for commentating wise, that kind of gave you the consistent stream of high tier events? Because I personally feel that you can get a big gig. That doesn't necessarily mean you're consistently getting like a stream of work afterwards. So when was the point that you started getting like actually a big break and you kind of sat back and you were like, oh, this is it now?
The field is at its maximum amount of competition right now. Like if
Mm.
you can draw a real similar thread between commentators and players, where like a lot of tier two players today would have run circles around Get Right in 2013. But the fact is, like, if you're firmly in tier one, you're in the partner leagues, and now you also like you're like shielded from having to go up and test yourself against tier two teams a lot. And that's where like some of the upsets happen in the RMR, where you're fully exposed in an open bracket. And the same thing can be said for casters, where there's obviously a lot of nepotism, as there isn't honestly any job. I think people think about that way too much, but it is true that it's harder to sort of break into getting to do more consistent, bigger events outside of someone gets sick, you get a call up, you get a chance, maybe you find someone to duo with. And for me, the first big opportunity that I had was we casted DreamHack Austin, which was an NA event, and Mark Winter asked us to come out to do that. That was a big break, and then we did a good job at that event. And the next week was my first event in Europe, which was it was a pair. It was in DreamHack Tour, and it was a at the time it was a minor for one of the majors coming up in 2015. And he asked us if we wanted to go to that event. So that was the first time we got to go over to Europe. And then we got into the DreamHack circuit that way. Then we actually flew back and did an MLG minor for the NA minor for that same year. And then from there, I just had enough exposure to like make enough friends in both the both in DreamHack and MLG to like be offered more work.
So would you say it was like probably quite just consistent rise up? Like there was just no like snap, I'm here now, or just more like a slow, steady, just like you got there eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like earned my stripes in the sense of, 2013. Me and like Sato Kiss asked me to come to an event to cast for free. Went to LAN ETS. I paid my own way out. I like we slept in the classrooms and casted just me and him for
What?
like from like 7 a.m. until like 3 a.m. for like 3 days in a row. There was no other casters. There was no pay. So I have like grinded in terms of really early CS:GO
Yeah.
and then eventually because when you grind early that's also a time where the game's not that big, there's not that much
Mm.
competition, and therefore the few people that have grinded get the opportunities if the game blows up. And that's something that's consistent advice for like investing for companies. It's like being first to market or being early is one of the easiest and best ways to like get opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good message I should send to people. So obviously you're quite known for your content creation. Is this something that you feel like distinguished yourself from others throughout the years?
I think I don't think about that um, in the same way as others might think about me. I just love YouTube.
Yeah.
So I think over the years, I think I've always looked at myself as a YouTuber. I actually hated being called a YouTuber while I was playing because that obviously, like, being called a YouTuber or a caster is almost like a slur, right? If you're like
Yeah.
trying to be like a good player or something like that. But I've really warmed up to it. And I just realized that all of my favorite things are these YouTube videos that I made like 8 years ago and how they still exist, how they're still getting pushed on YouTube. I just love everything about it. So I definitely view myself as a YouTuber. I think I'll be doing YouTube longer than I will be doing casting. And I think that it's something that brings me a lot of fulfillment. And the idea that not only, I can do Counter Strike and I can do analysis, I could do these green screen videos where I'm just hating on teams. I could do like a video game review. I can do other
Mm.
games if I want to. I just love that. Just a nice creative outlet for me.
I think that's a good thing in life because so has that content creation ever actually pushed you in a negative way where you've been at an event for instance and you're there like shit I need to get a video out, and has that ever been like a stressful thing more than a nice thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we every year I do the HLTV top 20, like my version of it,
Hmm.
and usually it's in December, which is like the busiest season for events. And like
Yeah.
last year, I had to do 20 videos in like 13 days in Copenhagen while I was casting an event. So in my hotel room, which is like with my travel setup, which I'm
Hmm.
doing not only like ironing out a list of top 20 players based on statistics, but then recording demos for each of them, getting my thumbnails done, uploading them, going to work every single day, trying to have some kind of social life at the same time. And so it can be very stressful. But now I've found a balance where I don't record on the road at all anymore. And I've decided to only upload extremely good and well edited videos that take about a week to do. And I do them and I will prep. I'll record like four of them and then I'll hand them to my editor and have 4 weeks of videos and I can travel and not think about it. So yes, I have struggled with that and I found a solution for myself.
That's actually a very just easy solution to find. Just like make it easier for yourself in general. And a conversation that floats around that I'm very interested to hear your take on. So a lot of people every now and again are like, oh, pro players need to make content when you're looking at like the longevity of their career. They need to start streaming, they need to make a brand for themselves. Is this something you agree with, or are you just completely like, oh, it doesn't matter?
I think the thing that I think it's easy to say, it's
Hmm.
easy to give that advice, but we all know a pro player that will never have a big YouTube channel, no matter how hard they try. I
Yeah.
mean, they might not want to do it. They might not be good at it. I mean, not everyone's cut out for every job. I'm not cut out to be in a pro player's position. A pro player might not be cut out to be a YouTuber, and it might actually just be a waste of time and self sabotage if they decide to allocate time to doing something else where you almost keep getting paid off the more time you just commit to playing and learning and studying the game. So players like Kerrigan should have YouTube channels because they're fucking perfect for YouTube. Like
Yeah.
personality wise, they have so much that they can do. And if anybody can figure out how to do it easily, they should for sure. And it is true that your career, it's not guaranteed. Like we like to talk about how Rops made, $1 million last year playing CS, but that's the 0.001% of players that have salaries that are that high, and then it drops off extremely quickly. I mean, if we even look at like, um, players like Hooksy on G2, for example, like they didn't get a big contract to come into G2, even though they're looked at as one of the best players, the biggest prospects right now. They're still very new into tier one, and so it quickly gets very scary for players. And so that's one reason they should maybe think about it. But there's no guarantee they'll be successful. And even more sadly, the fact is, if you're not a very popular tier one player, you've got to get your YouTube channel off the ground and put in just as much work as somebody who has no brand at all, which is really difficult. Whereas, like, like look at Rain's Twitter. Like he'll tweet like 2 times a month and it'll just go crazy. And that's all he has to do. If anybody else tried to do that, they'd get,
Hmm.
4 retweets if they're lucky. But um, being popular also comes with being extremely good, which means you're already probably very successful and don't have to worry about that. So it's like kind
Yeah.
of catch 22.
Yeah, that's kind of like if you're Carrigan, you can just post a video and like it could be the worst video in the world, but because you're Carrigan, you're gonna get 10K views standard. And I guess that's probably quite a nice thing. But yeah, you probably have to. I like the idea. I like the point you were saying of you have to be at least like a little bit charismatic to do it. Like you can't just make a YouTube channel. And I think especially for some like the lower tier players who haven't got that popularity and don't have that content mentality, it could probably be quite a difficult perspective. But sliding a little bit more into the modern day about yourself now. You talked in the past, I think it was in a Dust 2 article. You said that in 2018, when you left your job and you were working at Yahoo, you wanted to be your own boss. What would you say is the best bit about that decision over the last couple years?
I think that it's it's being your own boss is all about freedom. I think
Mm,
that's just the beginning and end of it, and that comes with it comes with a lot of things on both ends. I mean, if you like, okay, one thing I learned working at Yahoo was like, it's really nice to like get your paycheck every couple weeks, have your benefits, know your work hours, not have total responsibility over the entire company. And then on the downside, like you don't get everything you want, you don't have full creative freedom, you don't get to work with everybody that you love. And so being your own boss is something that I think people know about themselves. There's definitely upsides to not being your own boss and to helping someone else, build their dream or just focusing on what you're good at, but that might not be being a boss. And so I don't want to glamorize it too much. It's just about finding out what you want. And I just realized that I'm willing to deal with the drawbacks of having that much responsibility for the upside of having complete freedom, complete creative control,
yeah.
being able to take a project wherever I want, work as much as I want, and I just love that. So ultimately it's like the freedom of like, okay, like we have BOXR right now, and we are a C-level corporation registered in America, and we were originally going to take on investment and decided not to because I got advice from like, as actually Hastro, who I DM'd about it, and he just said like, bootstrap it as long as you can, because if as soon as you start to hand over money to investors, they get to control when you get to release things. You have to like answer them all the time, and that sucks, and you sort of lose that freedom, and that's where most like big companies and corporations are. And so, look at Valve. They have absolutely no pressure from any outside investment as a private company to like release a new fucking update every single week. Whereas like Valorant, Fortnite, Rainbow Six, like all these companies, they're all owned by like Tencent or some other investor that they basically get to dictate, what the games look like. And that's actually been really bad for a lot of those games. So I realized that, yeah, like having the power and control over what you have benefits you if you, in terms of freedom, even though it comes with more responsibility. And so that's what you're trying to weigh.
So do you find that because now you are your own boss, that actually gives you a higher limit that you can reach? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also, if you want to talk about like getting rich, for example, like if you don't own anything, you're not going to get rich. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
you that can be, and that doesn't mean that you have to run a company. That could be investing in a company, or like,
Mm.
being an owner of something else where someone else is running it and you trust them. But I think this is something that's, if we're talking about like how it would be good for pro players to think about running a YouTube channel, be a similar idea. It's like setting yourself up to one day have potential financial freedom. That's another like upside of owning something and running it yourself. Um, So sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's just like it gives you, yeah, just like it means that you can set a higher limit, right, for yourself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you know, the limit is what would be uh, an example is like, okay, you work for like a, let's say you share this YouTube channel, for example. If you share this YouTube channel, then you've got to meet everybody halfway. On the upside, you work with multiple people that can all grow the channel. The downside is like if one day you just want to take it somewhere else, you couldn't. It's not your channel, right? And so starting YouTube channel is free as well, right? You can always do content for one channel, start your own, and do it that way. But there are ups and downs, and definitely the maximum potential of having it and you being the sole owner of it is way higher, infinitely higher than working with other people on it.
Maybe making me question our whole business plan now.
You can choose to leave this in or not. I don't know who you
Yeah,
want to hear.
so yeah, guys, this is actually my last episode on the INSITE channel. I'm heading over to my channel. No, okay, I quite like this channel actually. I'm just riding off the back of others currently. But okay, so I want to take a look at you and Scrawny for a second. What do you feel like when you two became a duo back in like 2018, I think it was? What do you think distinguished yourself and divided you guys compared to other duos?
I think one thing for sure, if we compare ourselves directly with other duos, let's say like Matt and Henry, Anders Semler, DDK, and James, and then almost all these duos that I just mentioned, none of them have traditional color play-by-play roles. They all have a very kind of gray area between the two roles and have both shown at different points in their careers. Like even in the Matt and Henry, like late stage Matt and Henry towards the end, Henry was doing so much more play-by-play than he was in the beginning. And so I think for us, we've kept it traditional 100% of the time. I decided roles are like the best way to do this. I'm not better than Connor at play-by-play. I never will be, and he'll never be better than me at analysis. We both know this about each other. And so we give each other 100% of that space. We focus on improving in that arena specifically and exclusively. And then we only get better at those roles. So I think that that decision to do that, to be 100% traditional in our play by play and color commentary roles, I think are what sets us apart the most.
So do you still find that? Because yeah, that was something I noticed quite a lot of. Like, if you compare, say, in the modern day, you two to a Harry and Hugo, I feel like Harry and Hugo are very interchangeable. They are someone who, like the people you were just explaining, go back and forth and pick it up just from literally where the other person sets off. Do you still find that's a very distinguishable feature that you guys hold, and like it's an equity that others don't?
To say that Terry and Hugo are different from the others, or
Sorry, it's like Harry and Hugo as an example.
Harry and Hugo as an example of
Like
but
they
what would be
hybrid.
the
I
yeah
like to
that they
call it like a
hybrid, yeah.
hybrid type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So like all of these duos, including Harry and Hugo, have some kind of hybrid, and we just don't at all.
Okay.
Yeah, no one wants to hear my play by play.
I actually, yeah, like genuinely come to think of it, I'm struggling to find a time where you hard play by play. Now, like you really say that, that actually does make a lot of sense. But again, like I want to stick on this you and Scrawny topic for quite a while. In back in that Dust 2 interview, you said you were talking about how you guys were like really similar and you guys were really good friends. You guys have been casting together for like basically the best part of 5 years. After so many years in quite an intense situation, have there ever been times where this has strained? Because it has felt like you guys have almost just you've outdone a lot of the other duos in the fact of just being around for so long. How have you been able to keep this friendship together? And have there been any points where like it might have actually strained a little bit?
Yeah, I have nothing to hide when it comes to that. I think that uh, I I've come in as sort of like I always feel like I come in as like Connor's older brother in a sense, where I came in with more experience in the scene
Mm.
when I kind of picked him up to be my duo. I came in with somebody who got to see from other duos in the past where things went wrong. I got to see where the biggest stresses were with travel and work schedules, and I made sure that at every single event we talked about that all the time. consistently to like do maintenance on our mental health to make sure that we're
Mm.
like never overstraining. We have open conversations about what we should do better in terms of each other's roles, and we have like made a very very concerted effort to like learn from the mistakes of others. And that's not to say that everybody who had like made mistakes or like broken up in the past or whatever just like are such terrible people or have done terrible things. They're just people. And in the same way that you would have like an older brother younger brother relationship, younger brother learns from the mistakes of the older brother, not because the older brother is stupid, but because there was no one there to like show them the mistakes first. And I think that
Mm.
that's just a valuable asset that we have of being able to watch like what's gone wrong in the past and try not to sort of repeat history. So that's how we've kept a very healthy and stable relationship. I think the other side of that is ultimately we haven't had a situation where we're working 100% of ESL events and 100% of blast events, right? I think we're actually quite fortunate to do like 100% of blast events and some of the ESL events and keep a life at home. I think we have been able to like come back home, which is just a mental reset. And like, no matter how strong you are, how resilient you are mentally, when you're gone for 5 weeks and come back for 2 days and you're gone for 5 weeks again, you're not going to be the same person when you come home after that. It does take a lot of toll on you, especially when your job is to literally like be happy and interested.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, unfortunately, some days are harder to do that than others. And when you're just like on the road perpetually, it gets really, really difficult. So I think we have a very nice schedule as well that helps.
Okay, yeah, that's like I was going to talk about the schedule and like, the difficulties, but I guess that like that pretty much answered that question. And so like when you guys were coming up, were there any like duos that may have helped with this and may have helped with that were already a little bit fortified? Were there any duos that maybe like were or talent members in particular that were like actually giving you guys help when maybe you reached out for it and stuff like that?
I can reference something that every single talent has taught me 100%, whether they've told me directly or whether I've just learned from them by watching. But I sort of treat talent like a cafeteria, and I just pick the best of everybody and then try to bring that into my own personality. Originally it was sort of like following after Henry G, who I think who just brought so much energy as a color commentator. And I was like, okay, like I need to bring that part of my personality out a little bit more, and then balancing it out, and then learning from James about how to be funnier, honestly, and how to bring in a unique style of personality to a broadcast, and then like Machine's charisma, Sponge's like really really well balanced color commentary. Everybody has something that they've taught me directly or indirectly, and yeah, I would just basically go down the list because there's so much to learn, and we have so many insanely amazing commentators that like there's like no reason to not be good. It's why every other commentator is so good in CS:GO. It's because our like original top 4 duos were like the best duos you could find in esports. So like
Yeah.
if you were bad after that, like you're just not even listening. You know what I
It's
mean?
kind of like it's on you. And I think especially now, like it was building on that point a little bit, it was what you were saying back a couple minutes ago about how, in a sense, you could say there's a lot of talent, so there's a lot of more people to pick from, people reinventing their own style. So like now, especially if you're not doing that, I guess it's really on you. But a big part I wanted to talk about was in regards to your motivation, and because you were saying how like it's sometimes difficult when you're so busy. You guys have kind of done everything in a sense. You've casted the majors, you've cast the last two in particular, and like you're there's the upcoming one in Paris, and you did the RMRs for that. What continues to push you for motivation as a duo after like 5 years and now reaching the top and being like stable at the top?
Sort of like my goal personal, like everyone has independent like motivations of each other, and I can't speak to everyone's, but I've never once felt like I could be like the best commentator. I think that other commentators have that natural ability. They started off strong. They've had so many years of like big moments and amazing things. Whereas I've always felt like I've had to workhorse it. I've always constantly felt like I need to like work way harder than other people do to like get to a decent level or a level that I'm comfortable with. And now I'm at a point where like it is sort of natural. I do feel good about it, but it was never this overarching goal for me to like be number one in any meaningful sense.
Hmm.
And so my goal is to simply like when I look at myself in the landscape of Counter Strike, like all I think about is like how do I make this game proud? Like when I think about the commentators we have at events, I've realized that over the years, I've never throughout all of it had one commentator who I felt like was the best. There were times where I would want to listen to 10 maps of DDK and James doing Face It like all day long because they have a style that's so nice to listen to for all day. And then for some insanely big games, Sadokis and Henry delivered like no other. And then of course, Anderson Semler, Anderson Moses also have delivered in like some insanely hype moments and iconic ways that are just like crazy good. And all these periods of time, I realized like it's not really about being like the simple of casters. It's just like it's a mood based thing. I mean, we're
Yeah.
delivering, we're delivering a personality and a different flavor. And like, when I cast with Scrawny, like the whole point of a play-by-play and duo is to satisfy a more hardcore audience for the color and to satisfy everybody with the play-by-play and to make sure no one feels let down, but not to make everybody happy between the both of us, right? When people go, oh, like one caster is better than the other in a duo, there's another guy who feels the exact opposite about who they're listening to, and that just means you're doing a great job. And so it's not like one person who's responsible for making the broadcast amazing. It's everybody being as good as they possibly can and delivering different flavors, provided no technical errors or just like lack of ability or whatever. When everybody's at their peak, it's not about one person being the absolute best. It's just about, you know, different kinds of food that all taste good.
So interesting point you said there about how when someone maybe like picks apart the cast and is like, I like that and I don't like that. Do you find that as motivation then when someone like maybe criticizes you guys as a duo? Is that what you said?
True. Well, for me, when I listen to on the topic of criticism, I personally have the view that like this is also something that has like directly to do with you as a person outside of casting. It's
Hmm.
some people respond to the validation and stuff like that way differently than others. And I've realized that like I've never really had a problem with validation in my life. And Scrawny has, and he's talked about that on his podcast, for example. And I think honestly, a lot of personalities in general do. And I think because I don't struggle with the validation as much, that's actually why I'm not as good of a talent as I think some other people are. Because the neuroticism allows you to like improve in ways that maybe someone who doesn't honestly care as much about what other people are thinking, they might not be able to do it in the same way. So I try to channel that. But when I think about criticism, I've always believed and I know that when I read a comment that's true about me, it's not something I didn't know. If I
Yeah.
read somebody criticizing something about me, I'm only sad because they noticed it, but I always knew it was there. So I've always been of the mind that you're totally aware of what you need to improve. If you want to improve it, and if you want to improve it, that's a separate question from did you know you had to? And I think that because of that, the criticism doesn't sway me one way or the other. If I read something, I might be reminded like, ah, crap, someone noticed. Like
Yeah.
I gotta really work on that. But that's about it. I don't think anybody's uh there's no one splitting atoms in Reddit threads about what you need to do better. Most of the time, like half the time they're probably really off base. Some of the time they may be kind of, and there's one guy who just sees right into your soul, and that's good. And sometimes it's good for a reminder, but that's it.
That's such a phrase. Some guy just knows everything about your life. But I want to talk a little bit about modern day Counter Strike in general. And a lot of teams have a very packed schedule right now. Like we had the RMRs, and then we had Rio, and then we got Melbourne, and then we got the Major, and then like there's still Counter Strike. Like I know Counter Strike Online literally starts again on the 23rd, the next day the Major ends. Do you see this as a positive thing, or because in one side of it, teams getting opportunity, you got more teams looking to prove themselves. On another hand, do you find this a problem potentially with like burnout and people running out of steam?
It's tough because you have tweets from like Twist who says that he's exhausted. Apex said the same thing, and it's like some of these teams are partnered, and so everyone can't drop out of events that they maybe would have wanted to. Ultimately, I think that this is how Counter Strike is, and it's going to be like this for a long time. It's always been like this. Probably going to be more random. What's Brazy, whatever the tournament that
Brazy
popped up at like
party.
300 Brazy Party. It's like in CS2, there's going to be so many more events like that. I mean, there's going to be opportunities to play if you want to, maybe if you whether or not you want to, and there's going to be events that you are going to struggle at if you attend. Um, is it a good thing or a bad thing? I think overall it's proved to be an enormous positive. Um, when we compare, like, let's say for talent, right? Like, I mean, look at Valorant. They're just so sparse on events that like players and commentators, like, if they miss an event, they miss like a third of their pocket money for the year. Like, it's
Hmm.
really, really rough. Whereas in Counter Strike, there's so many ways in which you can participate in like a pretty major event. I mean, there's some good teams going to like this crazy party event, for example, because the prize pool is so big.
Yeah.
And I think that like the calendar going nonstop means it's the thing that makes up for the lack of updates in Counter-Strike. We have so much esports news to talk about all the time that gives us like a lot of content on the YouTube scene, the interview scene. It keeps the meta fresh and everything like that. There's lots of historical stuff to go back and uncover, which is something I'm focusing now on YouTube because I feel like it's just such a there's just so much stuff that gets missed because we move so quickly. But ultimately, it sucks to get burnt out. It sucks to be tired, but it sucks even more to not have work. It sucks even more to not have anything to watch. It sucks anymore to not have anything to play if you're a player. So being able to turn down an event is a privilege, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point to talk about. And so on that, I like cutthroat, the word used exactly there. In a play interview you did, you were talking about how making roster changes is like such a fast thing now. If someone doesn't perform like really at all in like a month, they get instantly swapped out. Do you think a big part of that quick changing roster changes is people trying to keep up with the constant cycle of CS?
I think that the reason roster changes happen faster now is because people are getting better faster. And the more stories you get with exertions and monacies out there,
Mm,
the less reason there should be to give someone another chance instead to go and look for that player because they're going to be good right away. And it seems like they can consistently be good and get better. And so it might be hard to find them initially, but I think there's always this thought, well, like, what's the point of like letting Masuda play for 2.5 years and his stats aren't improving, and then just saying, okay, he's pretty good, let's keep him on the team, as opposed to like, let's get Spinks, like
yeah,
let's get Spinks right now. You know what I
just
mean?
we wants like, instant upgrade.
And there was this, I think the rhetoric in like 6 or 7 years ago was if you didn't give a player 6 months plus, it was like a morally bad thing to do, abhorrent for org to like let go of a player that they just signed on. But these days, it's just more cutthroat. The game moves faster. People get better faster. There are other players who are worth a shot that are grinded and have insane stats in tier two. That, oh, if you took them, then they probably nerds. You know what I mean? Like players like that. That like you can see it, then boom, it's like instantly realized. So it is just brutal, but that's the way it is. And I think it's actually silly to give players too long
Okay, yeah,
of a chance, especially if you're running a tier one organization.
because I was literally just about to ask, like, okay, so that's like the objective view. What is your view? Because I think for me, I like the whole like phase dynamic, the Cloud9 dynamic, well, before, not anymore, where like they actually would just keep players and like work as a five. Do you not think that's a good thing then?
Oh no, I think that's a strange one because it's like if there's a problem with the player, you know, like for example with Cloud9, I have no problem. I don't think Inters was the problem with the team. I don't think Buster is the problem with the team. I think that's just a smokescreen. I just think that like their problem, like them losing to owning FaZe and then losing in the same map, owning Vitality and losing in the same map, losing to Mouse at Rio, like
Mm.
what does that show us? Like they're clearly good enough. They just can't end the games because they're choking. So like, is that the worst, like the lowest stats performing player in your team's fault? Like, no, come on, like that's not what the reason that you're choking. So there's certain moves where it's contextual. It just depends if you actually think there should be a change or not. But like I love when a team can keep five. Um, I love that Heroic kept five for so long, but when they made the move to Jabby from Refresh, I backed that publicly as a really smart move, and it's because Jabby, what he probably would have ended up on Astralis, and Astralis would be at the major if they took the chance on him, and instead Heroic took Refresh out, who's definitely better than Zippix was at the time, and which looked like like why would you do that? But Jabby was such a big talent that it was worth the risk, and it ended up paying off. So I think there's something to be said for keeping a relationship together, but there's also something to be said for knowing when it's time to take the risk.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And kind of staying on this like really fast changing pace of CS, you have publicly said before that you actually don't like how close tier 2 is getting to tier 1, and I feel like the RMR was a really good showing of this most recently in Europe, where we saw a lot of tier 2 teams rival the tier 1 teams in a very exciting way. 9 being an example. Do you not potentially see this as something that's quite exciting and something that forces higher teams to reinvent themselves constantly to keep up with all these upcoming teams that people see as the most inventive level of CS?
Uh, I think it's sort of like the problem is you want to see you want to see like all top 12 teams at the major. And so it's fun to watch an upset happen, but it's not fun to watch an upset happen and then the team who won bomb out in challenger stage. So and then knock out your favorite team in a easier format or in a different situation. So it's very good like to see people break in. You just want to see them. It's like when I think in an MMA match, it's like if you beat the champion or in a boxing match, you if you beat them, but if you like tied in any meaningful sense, then the current champion would retain their title because if you don't beat them by a significant margin, then it's just going to be a Pyrrhic victory. You're going to win, take the title, lose it again, and then you interrupt like a streak of greatness because of a bad day. You interrupt like a whole bunch of storylines. You definitely, you might have just picked, crowned a world champion that overperformed in a certain sense. So I think that it's great to have people break in, but I do think that like we all want to see the very best CS in the biggest stages. We obviously know that some of these teams would play well versus other top teams, and I don't think that tier one teams are lacking innovation. I think it's just very hard for them to break out of having to prepare for partner teams all the time into now preparing for tier two teams that have been studying them regardless of if they're playing them. Like they've been
Mm.
really sort of like they do have like that little edge. But I don't have any sympathy for like FaZe bombing out, losing to BNE, and like I don't feel bad for them. I want them to make it to the major, but I don't think like I would blame the format or I would say like the other teams like got lucky or anything. Like they lost. They lost. I'm not going to say that BNE is a better team than FaZe because they beat them at both Rio and this RMR, but they did lose fair and square. So there's that.
Yeah. Okay. So interesting point about the preparing. So obviously, like I can really see where your point is coming from with like a lot of these tier two teams just watch tier one teams demos because they're watching demos. So I guess they have their plan on that point. But like taking Virtus Pro actually as an example, you were talking about like the major champions bombing out. They're playing a team like ITB as an example. They have played like almost 100 maps in the past 3 months on HLTV. Do you think you slightly remove that whole thing of like, oh, it's harder to prepare when it's like Virtus Pro have a whole team of analysts, coaches, and they have 100 games to watch, best of threes to watch and pick out of it. Do you feel like maybe that idea of not being able to prepare as much is like voided, or do you still find that to be like a good point?
Okay. Well, I think that the other specific advantage that tier two teams have coming into tier one matches is the risks that they take,
Mm,
and the reason that they can't like take an upset and then like stay consistently in like at a tier one level is because they can't get away with the same playstyle for
yeah.
long enough. And then what happens is they all get shaved down. All the edges that they took off get smoothed over, and then they figure out how to optimize, and then they go through the exact same process that every single other tier one team has. And that's sort of how they get into tier one, but then also how they like have to like reinvent themselves once again. So um in some way, I mean, for sure we see with like a lot of the lower tier CIS teams that like it's when Spirit would play, they just did crazy shit, man. Like
Yeah.
they did crazy shit that it's like everyone's mad at it. They're still willing to do it on LAN. They're still willing to do it in matches, and then they actually got some success and they broke in and have like earned their respect. But they also have like they have pretty much have a hard cap, right? They like not winning a tournament with the current style. So I think that again, like these map wins are absolutely legitimate, and I don't feel any sympathy for the tier one teams that lose. But I don't think we're going to see like ITB take a Virtus Pro spot in the
Yeah.
top 20 rankings or have more consistent wins than them for a long time.
Yeah, a very interesting interview I did with Thomas 2 weeks ago. He was saying that like it just kind of comes down to it. Tier one teams get caught off guard, and tier one teams don't realize how hard they can shoot. And that's one of the big things of like you have all these incredible aimers, and tier one teams just don't anticipate that. And I feel like that is probably then leading on what you were saying of like it works for a little bit, it works for a tournament, and then the next tournament the teams go, okay, sound. we know you can do this. We're gonna give you more respect. So overall, consensus is you don't think that the gap being that close is a good thing. Is that the general consensus between tier 2 and tier 1 teams?
Yeah, but the framing for this has nothing to do with like the teams and who they're playing against. For me,
Mm.
I like dominance and I like eras because
Okay.
it speaks to the difficulty of the game itself. So if there is no dominance in a video in the video game or the sport, then there's a question of how hard the game actually is, right?
Yeah.
If we give enough credit to say that like all the best teams in the world are trying as hard as they possibly can to stay on top, despite the travel, despite like the constant competition behind them, then we want to see that that actually can result in consistent wins over lower ranked teams overall. Now, this has the presumption that like these teams are trying that hard, but I am assuming that they are. So I think that like, and I just personally think that the reason the dominance is becoming less is just because people are getting really fucking good at every single detail about every single map, with
Yeah.
like every little smoke, every piece of movement, optimizing every detail. And at a certain point, it is so hard to be consistent in every action in every round throughout every tournament versus all of these different teams on like who are constantly evolving and changing. So that's why I also said that I think CS2 couldn't have come at a better time because I think we are reaching the ceiling. The ceiling could be instantly reset if you had a new map pool, right? I think that the ceiling has specifically to do with the maps in the pool and how much we know about those maps. So there's that. But we even see how quickly it feels like Anubis has been figured out. Like already,
Mm.
it almost feels like most teams agree on how to take most of the map control execs and what they look like. And certainly things will develop and still change on the map, but that was the fastest I've seen like teams acclimate to a map that come into the pool since ever. And I think it's just because of how many analysts, how much infrastructure, how much experience all these guys have at learning new maps. Like people are just getting really good at CS:GO. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you said there about CS2 because my next question was going to be about, right, CS2. What's the crack with that? Do you think it's a good thing? Looking at now CS2 coming out, what are some features that you potentially would like to see implemented that could higher also set the skill gap a little bit higher?
Yeah,
Skill
I
ceiling,
think
I
that
think. Yeah.
skill ceiling,
Yeah.
yeah, increase the skill gap. The smokes are the obvious thing. It's the new sandbox element that we've got in CS2 that is, I think, key for making sure that we have longevity. If we look at like Fortnite has like the editing mechanic and building, which just it explodes the skill ceiling in terms of
Mm.
like how much better you can be than someone else. Rainbow Six has like really dynamic wall banging where you can like shoot one bullet through a wall and have an angle that didn't exist in any other rounds. And so Counter Strike is also a sandbox with the utility, how it can bounce almost anywhere. And if you don't have any sandbox element in your game, you're doomed to have like a really hard limit and people to find it very fast. But as long as the game is relatively dynamic, then people's creativity can dictate how good people can get and like how far ahead they can get from someone else. And I think with the smokes being dynamic on top of the game already being a sandbox, I think you add that dimension that can create for a really enormous potential skill gap, or maybe not. We have no idea what the smokes will give us, but for now, I've seen stuff like when I was playing CS2, I had this scout clip where like someone shot at me through a smoke, one bullet, and I saw their head in the middle of a smoke, and I hit a flick, and it was like, the most insane shot ever. It felt, and I was just thinking, Monasty's going to do this every round, and it's going to look incredible, and it's going to look different every single time. So I think we can see potential for a really, really high skill ceiling in CS2.
Okay, so implementing more things that make the game more reactionary, is that kind of the consensus?
Yeah, right. Reactionary, dynamic, I guess is the word I would use.
Yeah.
But if yeah, without creativity, it's going to be a hard cap. So I think dynamic smokes is pretty much dynamic smoke or dynamic utility, which is the most important sandbox element in Counter Strike, and then maps.
Okay.
Those are the two things. Yeah.
Okay, nice. And then, so kind of coming towards an end now, I want to look at the major. This is obviously the last CSGO major. Do you feel like it potentially puts a little bit more pressure on some teams and some individuals to either make either make a deep run or win?
Enormous pressure. I
Hmm.
mean, think about Nico right now. He's probably just felt like the last guy to win a major, and
Yeah.
like it's like the deserve is such a silly word. If you win, you win. if you don't. I mean,
Mm.
everyone else has an excuse. What about the guys who took it over you? You know, so I don't think he's thinking about like he deserves a major or anything like that. But I think he's thinking this is my last chance to prove that I can win it. And he's got the perfect team to do so, but enormous pressure with that. So um, you know, Zaiwu, I think there's some crazy, you know, it might be like an off percentage argument for him to best player of all time just because of the consistency as an individual level alongside of how weak his team has been, which is team had literally been weaker than Simple's 2018 team in his best year, apart from Spinks now getting good again. So there's like a lot of really insane things that could happen. Kerrigan winning 2 majors, well, that does hold a candle to Glaive now, in my opinion. I think Kerrigan has a really, really impressive resume regardless. And actually the argument is a lot closer than it would appear, more than just results. But with 2 majors, you know, 2 majors and all the other things that he's done that have been incredible, then you know that conversation gets opened up again for me. Um, lots of storylines and
Yeah.
last chances for all of the top teams, and most of these teams have an ability to win a major, which is the crazy part as well. You know, there's like 5 teams right now that could win the major. There's no favorite, in my opinion, for the major, and this is the first time that there's I think there's not been a favorite in general.
Okay, so you said the 5 teams that you think are going to be favorites. Prediction right off the bat, who's going to win?
I think G2 are my pick to win the major. Um, and then I think it would be like G2, Heroic, FaZe, Navi, Vitality, and then, you know,
The
then we go
rest.
down to like really nebulous picks.
Sure, Into the Breach is the next one, right? That's definitely
Oh yeah, I forgot
yeah,
about
yeah.
them.
Of course, yeah. I know it's easy mistake. But as a final message, do you have maybe something that you would like? Another message that you would like to say to anyone that's maybe like an upcoming content creator or an upcoming caster, that a little bit of advice that potentially you would have been valuable to hear when you're on the up and come?
You know, anybody who's born today or in the last 15 years was born into a world where you could log on and you're just like inundated with so many options and so much information and the ability to do everything. And actually, that can encumber you. And the fact that you have all of this potential all the time. And that's why I think people actually do less. And so I think it's really important to remember that, you know, your parents, when they wanted to have an opportunity to be successful in their life and own something, they had to invest all their money to open a brick and mortar restaurant or store, convenience store, or something like that, buy a taxi cab, like do something with a huge investment. And we don't have to do that anymore. If you want to try something, you can do it for free on YouTube for very low cost with all the minimal amount of gear that you can get. You can create, you know, a lot of things in ways that you could never do before. You don't have to get on TV to be famous anymore. So my best advice is like, you know, you follow this already. You know, if you try it, you're ahead of 99% of people. If it doesn't work out, well, it costs you nothing. You can try something else. So just keep trying things, and remember that also creativity in our jobs is a muscle just like any other. And for some reason, creative people think that they've got to wait for creativity to strike, but I think we've learned at this point that creativity strikes more the more that we try to be creative. So just keep the same work ethic that you'd see from someone who is more right-brained or left-brained, I guess. And I think you'll also see huge benefits. Hardworking and creative, best combo.
I think that is literally the best place to end off. Thank you so much again, Launders, for coming on. This has been In the Crosshair. We have had Launders in the Crosshair. It's a weekly series that we are posting. And next week, we've also got a very, very exciting guest. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But thank you very much, guys. And if you are here, make sure to drop a follow on our Twitter and Instagram. Thank you very much once again, and I'll see you guys next week.